Hey guys, MasterOfFlowers here. This could be a response video to Lester Crow, the Thestrollingbones video on PC Death. I had started to type some stuff up, and it just started taking too much. As I wanted to give a few examples of my death, as when he had given us a couple examples of how he died. It made me think of my youth and when I was when I actually got to play for the first couple times. I was lucky enough to have family members who, specifically my stepfather and some uncles who all played D&D, and so I was able to get into it at a really young age. I was 6 the first time I was able to watch, and I think I was actually 7 the first time I played, around there anyways. We used to get together on family, on Thanksgiving or Easter. When the family got together, we usually played board games or try a new game. And Dungeons and Dragons was one of the few games that we did try and played on several different occasions. But to the point at hand, I ended up creating an elf character that I brought into the dungeon, and after spending an hour and a half explaining the rules, and then another 40 minutes rolling up our characters and playing them, we started our journey into the dungeon. And I remember we got maybe 20 feet into the dungeon, a whole 7 minutes into the game, and there was a small alcove, and there was a dwarven skeleton there, and there was something shiny in the skeleton's eye, and I had my elf reach down and grab it to see what was in there, and a giant centipede came out and bit me on the hand. I failed my poison saving throw and died. So you get this a great example of I played a whole 7 minutes. So I had an hour and 15 minutes, or 2 hours and 15 minutes of prep time and 7 minutes of play time. And at 7, I can honestly tell you I was probably pretty furious at not being able to play and just having to sit there for the next 3.5 hours while they completed the game. The second time, I was sure that I was going to do a better job, and I had decided that I wouldn't grab anything off the ground or do anything like that. So I was lucky enough to roll up another elf character. This is D&D first edition, so we didn't you didn't really have a choice. You just rolled your stats, and we got maybe, I'm gonna say, 15 minutes into the game this time. We had traveled down a different court. I think it was probably even the same module. And we got past where I got past where the dwarf skeleton was, a little farther down, and we came into a room where, upon opening the door, there was a hobgoblin. And I don't know, it took over me as soon as he said roll initiative, and I won initiative. I was like, I'm gonna run in there and kill him. So I said I'd run in and stab him with my sword, and lo and behold, I rolled and missed, and then he swung back and stabbed me with his spear, and I died. So basically, I've had 23 minutes of playtime in in a year's worth of gaming for my family at that time, and so that kind of shaped my experience on how I would play. And I think that if the first edition rules had lent itself to power gaming, I might have kind of gone the power game route, really jacked up my strength, or jacked up my constitution to give me more hit points. It probably would have been one of those things that I probably did, but but for the most part, it just made me a cautious player, and I was a lot more careful on the things that I did from that point on, until I was at least, I think, probably around 10 or 11 when I started jamming my own games, and then my style of play totally changed. As even back then, I was caught up in the story that we were telling together, but I didn't create background for my characters. I think I was just too young. So thanks. You brought up those fond memory of those deaths when you were telling me about when you told us the story of your character dying from poison, which reminded me of me dying from poison. I've never had a character die from old age. Most of the time in the campaigns that I play, they usually just get as Andrew would say, they're fumblers. They just kind of end. We never get to finish those campaigns. For me, anyways, as a player. And also, I was thinking when you mentioned the wagon, where you had a friend, a GM had made him die from getting run over by a wagon. That's where, real life, the realism, you need to actually put that aside and say, yes, I mean, it's possible someone could fall off a wagon and get run over and die. I mean, I'm sure it's happened a million times back when wagons were, popular modes of convenience. Um, and I know people have died from falling off horses or stepping down, falling down stairs. I mean, these are all things that do happen to people, and it is fairly common. But there's a point where you want to have the fantasy realism. You don't want the player to fall off a horse and die, or fall off a wagon and get run over by the wheels. To me, I always picture the players as they're a cut above the rest. They are more, we'll say they're luckier. They're luckier than the average person. If the average person falls off the horse, he could die. The player does it, he kind of hits the ground and rolls just right, or lands on a stack of hay that happens to be next to him, or some poor farmer who was passing by, he lands on that person when he gets bucked from the horse. There's all these little things that can change it, and I think as GMs, if you want to keep your players interested and continue coming to play, you gotta make those choices. Now, I'm not saying I wouldn't kill my players. If my player does something stupid, if he, I've killed, here's an example. I kill players for doing stupid things. I had a player once who told me, "Oh, I'm gonna jump off the cliff," because I had told him it was a 100-foot drop, and he knew that, I think he was like 17th level or something. He's like, "Oh, I could survive that, so I'm just gonna jump off the cliff." Well, I actually killed him. I just made him die because I just said, "Oh, it's massive damage, man. You gotta make a saving throw," and I put a really high DC on it, and he died, and he was pissed at me for doing that. But there's a certain point where you're just metagaming, and to me that was a power gaming move, not an actual storytelling thing. Now, if say a dragon was flying by and he wanted to leap off the cliff, that's 100 foot down, but he's going to leap down 30 feet to land on top of the dragon, something epic like that. Hell yeah, do that. Jump off the cliff, but just to jump down because you didn't want to make a climb check, that seems kind of silly to me. There was one thing else that I wanted to actually mention too. Okay, so I just figured it out. I had to go back and review the video. You were talking about it's an epic way to express yourself in a story way if your character dies, and I agree that those are awesome. If you can get the right, story going at the same time with the right, with the right story build up, for that, decisive death that just sticks out and it resonates and everything comes together and it's a perfect death. That's great. I do have a problem with players who, and maybe most people haven't run into this, but I have players who've just played looking for the epic death, and that may seem weird, but they're the ones who, it's set up where maybe the PCs are fleeing from some sort of kobold cavern, and they're all running, and there's one player, he stops and turns around and says, "Alright, I'll hold off the kobolds in this thin corridor while the rest of the players run away," which sounds pretty epic. It's kind of cool, it's awesome, he's saving other players' lives, and you kind of think that's great, but if he traveled 10, 20 more feet up the cavern, there was a small portcullis that can be pulled down and dropped and prevent the kobolds from following. So sometimes there can be problems when you have that player who's searching for that epic death, and he kind of, instead of playing the story, he's playing the death. I think that can be, I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's what I'm thinking anyways. I've had players like that who sometimes I don't know if they get bored or they don't like the character that they're playing, so they're looking for that epic death, so they can maybe roll something up for another, for farther down the game. I don't know, but I've had these guys who continually try to just kill their characters off in a really cool way, which I kind of like it personally. I kind of like it more when it happens naturally. It happens in a way that you didn't expect, they didn't expect, no one expected it. You're just playing it out, and you're rolling your dice, and you're telling the story, and you got this grand thing going on, and then all of a sudden, oh my god, in your head as the GM, you probably already know. You're a couple steps ahead. You could see where this is going. You've got the numerical values. Maybe you're like, oh crap, one of these people is going to die, and one of the players steps up and he kind of just takes the reins and he tells that story, and it's awesome. So there's just a few thoughts I thought I'd put out there, and just wanted to thank Mr. Thestrollingbones for giving me a shout out, and looking forward to seeing more of the videos that he puts out. Alright guys, take it easy.